But thank you all for coming in, and we will have 3 or 4 more parent copies for the 8th grade parents who will combine the 7th and 8th this year. We actually have another one in 2 weeks, November 9th, and that will be, we'll get some information out about the grading that we're doing in the teen classes this year. We've been changing that and how we're reflecting the grades, and Canvas does not do a good job of showing what we're trying to do, and we're still working with that. So we thought before progress reports, it might be helpful to have some of the team teachers just explain. And again, that's a process for us. We are trying to come up with a good way of showing parents through Canvas, which again is kind of complicated, how we are working with your son to continue to have them progress towards mastery at these skills in the teen classes. It works well in class. It works well with the feedback and sort of pushing that and a lot of conferencing with the teachers. What's difficult is finding a way to show them. So if you're having trouble figuring out what it shows, it's because it's not coming across clearly. So we're going to do a parent copy in 2 weeks to sort of see if we can supplement that. Some of you, your son's advisor is one of his teen teachers, so during a parent conference you can probably ask those questions, but if your son's teacher is the math, if your son's advisor is the math teacher or the language teacher, they're not going to be able to explain it as well. So that's why we'll do that in 2 weeks. Today we're going to talk about the HSPT, High School Placement Test, and merit scholarships. Today's more about, I'm going to throw some information at you. And then we'll have plenty of time for questions about other things. We'll have a parent coffee in January, which will be much more of a discussion. We'll actually we'll sit around tables in here to talk about 8th graders as they go through adolescence and become really difficult. That's a fun one. And then as we get into the spring, there'll be a couple that will focus much more on the high school. And in late February, early March, it's Mr. Drain coming in, talking with you all about high school freshman courses and the course selection process. And then later in the spring, we'll have the vice principals for student affairs and mission identity talking about all the co-curricular opportunities that your sons will have in high school. So today, let's just talk about what's that process of getting into high school. First, let me say, your sons have an automatic entry from 8th to 9th grade. They don't apply. They don't really have to do anything until we get to the course selection process in the spring, where we'll explain it to you, we'll explain it to them. There aren't a whole lot of choices they have to make, but there are a few ones, and they make those choices with you, and then you have the advisor sign off on it. But it's pretty simple. The only times that there's an exception to that automatic entry is if your son was really struggling in one way or another, and then you and I would be having a conversation about what's the best, move going forward. But I would say most years, somewhere between 90 and 95% of our students will go on to the high school. Most of the ones who don't go on, it's because of their choice. They've decided to go to some other school or go back to the public school, or they're moving across the country, or whatever it is. The vast majority of our students do go on to the high school where they're very successful. So what is the HSPT? HSPT, the name is the High School Placement Test. Please forget that P word, placement. It really has nothing to do with anything. That's just the name for this standardized test. It's given by Catholic schools across the country. So however well your son does on it will not affect whether he's going to the high school. Nice thing in some ways, it's also negative in other ways, because it means a lot of the guys realize, I don't have to care about this test. So we have that issue. It also, despite the name of it having placement in there, it doesn't affect his placement in his classes next year. All right, that is not going to come into play, with one possible exception that may affect one student every few years, and that's down the road going into calculus. Whether he's ready for calculus or not, if he's on the border, they will look at his math and quantitative scores in the HSPT to see just as another piece of data. And then maybe to say whether he should be in calculus or pre-calc honors. But again, that affects very, very few students over time. Again, you have to be on the borderline, and then they have to look at it. So really, for the math placement for next year, PHSPT is not going to be part of it. That's going to be his math teacher and a placement test that they do this spring. For language honors classes, or placing into level 2 honors or level 2, or maybe having to repeat level 1 next year again, that'll be based mostly on the recommendation of his language teacher, as well as the placement test they take in the spring. So this test will not have any impact on that for your son next year. So why do we bother doing it? A couple of reasons. It's a standardized test, and a few years from now, your son will take much higher stakes standardized tests. So it's not a bad thing for him to get one more exposure to standardized tests and bubbling and multiple choice things and stuff, and just the idea of trying to maintain the stamina over a 3-hour exam. It doesn't cost you anything. We take the time out of the school day, and it just gives him that look, because he doesn't get that many opportunities for those books. There's also some good information you find. There's 5 tests in the HSPT. 2 are what we call cognitive tests, the verbal test, and the quantitative tests. And those basically try to assess sort of how well his brain is set up to learn. And then you have 3 tests, which are more, they're called achievement tests, and that's in reading, math, and language. And when I talk about language, it's really English grammar. It's not foreign language, it's English grammar. So they have the 5 tests. First 2, again, the cognitive ones, to test somewhat, people say potential, or again, I would say how well the brain is set up to learn in a certain way. What do we get from that? Well, if the test comes back, and he's done really well on the 2 cognitive tests, and really well on the 3 achievement tests, we say, well, he's brilliant, and he's learning at a high level, and everybody's happy. Sometimes you see cognitive tests, he's doing really well, but then the achievement tests, he doesn't do as well, and we try to say, hey, is there a reason for that? So sometimes we can get some information. Sometimes the reason is, yeah, I got tired and stopped really working hard on those last 3 tests. Okay. But sometimes there is something there that we can, we say, this doesn't make sense. Why has he got an 80%, he's 90% on quantitative, but he's 60th percentile on math? That's a big gap. And he says, no, he didn't, fall asleep on the test or anything like that. We've had some situations where we said to parents, hey, this is worth looking into. And remember one student long ago, class of 2014, talked to parents about they got them tested over the summer, and they discovered a learning issue that would never have been detected otherwise. And this is a kid who was very bright, but struggled at times and couldn't figure out why. They were able to figure this out, be able to talk to him, give him some strategies, and then he was much more successful in high school and much happier. So sometimes we find something. It's not that often, but occasionally we do. The other times you see a guy who the cognitive pieces are not as high, the verbal and quantitative, he does really well on the other things. Often that's a guy who's a really hard worker. Sometimes there's some other things we try to figure out. The other thing it does is it'll give you a sense of what, okay, my son does really well in school, he struggled on the standardized test, maybe we'll do a little more, maybe we will look at a test prep course before he takes the SAT, or the ACT, or the PSAT. So again, it's just one more data point that can be helpful. Sometimes it's not that helpful, but again, for some it is. It also gives us some information on, are there any places we need to do a little more? We tend to do, our boys tend to do really well in math on the test. And that's not unusual. We're an all-boys school, and there still tends to be some gender issues there. And we do the worst on language. Sometimes I'm aware that it's good to put the test, including the first test. would we have higher scores? But sometimes I also know that in this area, language is a little weaker on standardized tests because the language arts is taught in the elementary schools and all the way up through really is much more on a full language base rather than a drill and kill grammar. And there's lots of benefits to that, not so much on the standardized test, the test language. The ISEE, by the way, which your sons took 2 years ago, did not have that language one. It just had verbal, quantitative math, and reading. So the language is a new one that's thrown in. If your son is preparing for the exam, the language test is the one he should probably look at the most. Because that's the thing that will be less familiar to him. That's the thing that will struggle the most over. So just keep that in mind. A couple of just some points that may be helpful, may not be helpful to you. When the score sheet comes back, there'll be a bunch of different scores. There's local scores and national percentile scores. The local percentile is just our 8th grade. Because we take that, we do that test just for our 8th grade here, so it's not compared to like the Boston local areas. If he takes it on a Saturday, you know, with other students that are applying to the schools for 9th grade, then he would be in a different local percentile. But if he takes it with us, his local percentile is going to be just the 8th graders who take it on. It tests more of that sort of basic grammar knowledge. You know, it's not an essay writing. So it is that sort of, can you identify the verb in the sentence? Can you identify the grammatically incorrect, you know, what's incorrect in the sentence, things like that. The test is going to be December 12th. We have a liturgy day on December 12th. So our 8th graders will take, instead of going to the liturgy, they'll take the test in the morning. We'll do a liturgy with them separately in the afternoon. So the other thing that the test is used for is for merit scholarships. So we've had merit scholarships at BC High for years. And there's one shot at the merit scholarship. So coming into 9th grade, that's when you can earn a merit scholarship. And the merit scholarships were originally started to put in place before we had the Arupe division. Many schools around here use them for 9th grade entry. They're a recruitment tool coming into 9th grade. So there's, you know, as they look at, okay, how are we going to figure out who deserves a merit scholarship, who doesn't deserve a merit scholarship? The HSPT, or they can take the SSAT as well, but most kids take the HSPT. The HSPT is the dominant factor in that. A student has to hit a certain score threshold on the HSPT to be considered for a merit scholarship. It is usually about around the 90th percentile in the national composite percentile. It's not definitely the 90th percentile. I mean, it could be a year where there's only so much money in the merit scholarship pool. So if there were a lot more kids who scored higher, it could be 92nd percentile. Generally, it's been around the 90th percentile. I've never seen it lower than that. Whatever the finance and admissions set as that threshold, that's what it is. And I say this, we've had outstanding students get an 89 in a year where the threshold was 90, and they didn't get a merit scholarship. Because whatever it is, you have to hit that to get into the pool. If your son hits that, and he gets a merit scholarship, you're happy. If he just misses it, it's frustrating. But let me just be clear, that is the rule of the game. And yeah, you can make an argument about, hey, it should be something else. However you set the rules, it's going to help somebody, it's going to hurt somebody. That is the rule. And I don't make them, I just am trying to explain it to you all, just because I get all the phone calls when people are angry, even though I don't make the rule. So again, if your son tests well, and if you're thinking, I will tell you this, from the ISEE to the HSPT, the ISEE is taken by a much smaller pool of students nationally. So the national percentile in the ISEE tends to be much lower than it will be on the HSPT. Generally speaking, again, this is on average, students tend to jump about 20 points from the ISE to the HSPT. We've also had students jump 40 points from the ISE to the HSPT. And if you get a 95th percentile on the ISE, then you cannot jump 20 points. You can only jump up to 99. So, but just so you know that. So, you know, if you're thinking, well, is my son likely to be sort of in that group looking at a scholarship? Again, if your son was certainly in the 70s, 80s, 90s on the ISE, yes, he's a very good test taker. He ought to be taking this seriously. But again, we've had guys jump from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s up into the 90s. So, you know, I wouldn't rule anybody out. Just, you know, kind of give you a sense of it. I think last year we had, I want to say, maybe 50 students get into that 90th percentile or above category. It tends to, I think last year was a little high, it tends to be about 30% of the class. On average, we go some years are better, some years not as good. Yeah, and then we had another, like, I would say eight students last year that were sort of 87 or 88. I will talk to the students sometime next month, probably sometime in the next couple of weeks, about the HSPT, just to kind of get it on their radar. I'll talk to you all first because you're thinking about it before they're thinking about it. A couple of things I would recommend. Probably the two most important thing he can do to prepare well for the HSPT is get a really good night's sleep the night before and 2 nights before. 2 nights of good sleep in a row. That is probably number one thing he can do, because again, it's a long test and stamina comes into play. And just being able to focus and able to think, that's a good one. The other thing he needs, you know, if he's going to try to prepare for it, for most guys, it's just familiarity with the test. And that's where you can, you know, there's resources and there, so therefore you can take practice tests online. Just being familiar, again, particularly with the language section, because that's going to be questions he's not usually seen. Familiarity, and the other thing they need to practice with is just the pacing. Because, you know, it's timed, and if your son has testing and qualified for a percent time, we set that up as well. But even so, pacing, and I would say the pacing particularly on the reading session, where they have to read a piece and then answer questions. Some of the guys, they'll come out of that and say, whoa, how did that finish so quickly? You know, again, if they've done a couple of timed practice tests, and they don't have to do the whole thing at once, but you're thinking, because most of the sections it's between a 25-minute and a 45-minute test with the time period for the section. Just having that practice is helpful. We don't offer an HSPT prep course here. Some places offer them, and they have one, you know, some of a lot of, often they're offered at some of the Catholic elementary schools because those kids are going to be all applying out for 9th grade. What we have done for a number of years now, at a parent recommendation, was we do in November an HSPT club. So it's usually often a couple different days, one or 2 days for English, and so the English and verbal reading language sections, and 1 or 2 days for quantitative and math, where they get together, they can do some practice tests, they can talk about questions. Because again, that's the thing, becoming familiar is sometimes looking at, hey, why do we get this? So we have some teachers, I'll recruit some teachers to run those sessions. It's November, so the sports seasons are over. We're always looking to add a few more clubs at that time. This is a pretty good one. We get a lot of, you know, sometimes you'll go in, there'll be 30 kids in the room or more. So it's a nice way, again, there's a little bit of good peer pressure. You know, they see their friends are going to it, and the kids also build familiarity because they see in the announcements on daily, yes, HSPT Math Club is meeting today, or HSPT English is meeting today, and they start to sort of say, oh yeah, that's that thing that I'm supposed to take on. And we find, for some of the kids, it's a lot easier to get them to actually do it if they're doing it with their friends, and if you're sitting here with them, go online, take the practice test. No, yeah, other guys are much happier doing it on their own. But again, sometimes just allowing that camaraderie does help. But it's not an HSPT prep course in which they really teach, how to diagnose a question and how to, how to game the system. I don't know if you ever taken an SAT prep course. There's a real sort of sense of this is how the SAT tries to fool you. This is how you can fool it back. So we don't do that with the HSPT club. It's really just it's an opportunity for them to, again, do the two things they need to do. Become familiar with the types of questions they're going to be asked and start to do some practice testing to get the pacing. Is it worth getting the workbook? Again, it really depends on every individual. Yes, it can be. I know when my son was in 8th grade, he did the HSPT club. And we had to do sort of look at do some practice tests online, and that worked out well for him. But again, you probably by this point in time have a sense of your son is a pretty good test taker, and what that means is he thinks like the test takers think, and so that's an advantage for him. Or he never tests as well as he's capable of in school, and so for that guy, then he might need more instruction on how to do it. And again, the books can be good for that. Working with someone can be good for that. And I'm always trying to be careful with this. I don't want to put a whole lot of pressure on the guys. That's not what this is about. And so some parents would like me to put more pressure on their specific son because they really like him to do much better than he's going to do. But I don't, and I do. I will talk to them, and I will talk to them about the fact that there are merit scholarships involved. And again, I don't want to put that kind of pressure on them, but only in the sense of when the letters go home saying, hey, you received a merit scholarship and you're invited to this breakfast, and that's sort of late February, early March, so those letters go out. I say to the guys, look, if you're in a peer group of guys that do well in school, and these are the ones you hang around with, you want to do well on this test because you don't want to be the one guy in your peer group that doesn't get that letter. And again, I'm trying to say it the most careful way I can, but I do, because that's the thing that really disappoints them the most. The money's nice more for the parents, but I think for the kid, it's that I didn't get it. I also, and then that's the hardest part, I think, is and sometimes you just had a bad day on that test. Maybe whatever happened, Great bubbled wrong. Maybe the kid who puts the two answers on the same line and the next 20 answers are wrong. That happens too. So what I usually do before the letters go home is I usually call down. I see the list of how they did. I usually look at guys I know who are really good students, getting straight A's or whatever it is, who didn't get that, whatever the threshold is. I usually call a group of about 12 to 15 guys down to my office and let them know, hey, the letters are going out. Some of the guys you know well are going to get them, you're not. And which sounds awful. But on the other hand, what I want them to see is, and this is what I emphasize, is, look, everybody in this room is a really good student. And everybody in this room is going to do really well next year and the years going forward. And it's just as likely that one of the people in this room is going to be the speaker at graduation than one of those guys who got, hey, let's be, and try to be real with them about this means those guys did well on this test on that day. And that's what it means. Now, there happens to be they get to go to breakfast and they get a merit scholarship out of it, but that's because they did well on this test on this day. And that doesn't mean long-term much else other than that. And again, there's always going to be a guy who should do really well on that day and doesn't. The other thing I would say is, if your son's sick that day, don't send him in. He shouldn't take the test if he's feeling awful. And it's December, somebody's going to be sick. We've even, We've had a couple guys, but because they've been sick, we've been able to figure out a way to do the test later. We had a guy who was concussed, so we waited a little, we did his later. If your son's really feeling miserable, that's not a day to take the test. So they get 2 good nights of sleep. They have to score a certain thing to get in the pool for the merit scholarship. How many guys get it? Almost every one of them. The only thing that would then prevent you is if you have poor grades or some sort of major disciplinary issue. But yeah, so most of them, every year there's 1 or 2 that really don't do well in school, but they really score well on the HSPT. Those are the most frustrating kids you can find. For the guys who score the highest, the 99th percentile, there used to be a thing called the Shields Scholarship. Mr. Shields, the guy who gave money for that, and it was 50% for 4 years. Tuition, so whatever, tuition is 22, that's 11 grand a year. That's significant. And then but that's only for the very highest. And then I don't know if it's 1,500 a year. I want to say somewhere around 1,500 a year for 4 years, give or take in there. Some years we give someone gives more money, so the money goes up. Some years we get less money, so or the more kids, so it's spread a little wider. That's more of a finance office question. Yeah, so we have 168 eighth graders right now. Ninth grade will probably be about 300 to 315. So it usually close to double, a little less this year, but somewhere around, usually around 315 would be a freshman class. So another 150 students or so will come in for next year. When do the results usually come out? So we take it in December, send it in. Sometimes, again, we're waiting for one more or whatever, but then we send them in. So usually about first week of January, we get the results back, and we'll send the results home to you. So there'll be, there's 2 sort of sheets. One has lots of numbers on it, and one has some helpful bar graphs. And when you get it, if you're looking at it saying, what does this mean, feel free to give me a call, give Mrs. Cornby a call, and we can answer your questions. Yeah, we'll send those sometime in the first half of January. Merit scholarships are all about academics. So and again, you have to hit whatever the score threshold is. Then the admissions will call me, admissions and finance, whatever the committee is, will call me and say, can you send the grades? So behavioral issues, stuff like that. Once in a while that comes into play. And I'm not talking about a jug because he didn't put a belt on, or seriously, or even a couple jugs because he didn't put a belt on. It's really a significant issue that would come into play. Guys are supposed to make mistakes. They make mistakes on a regular basis. We like to work with them, etc. We're not going to crush the next 4 years because of something small. This is a test on one day. Yes, there's some wonderful benefits if he does well, but there's really no reason to panic over him not doing well. And hey, there might be some information we find out again. I had one year, the boy again did really well in the cognitive scores, really high, and then just hangs the reading, the math, and the language. So I called the parents and hey, it could be a learning issue because it's really high up here than here. I said, but it might also be he got lazy. So the mom talks to the son, and she called me back. She said, yep, he was just lazy. He got tired and said, I'm not doing it. She said, but I'm really annoyed with that, so I'm going to make him spend a day getting tested just to make sure there's nothing else going on. And there wasn't. Yeah, the hardest day is the day when guys find out that they didn't get, that their friends start calling, did you get the letter? Did you come in the next day? Did you get a letter? Did you get a letter? That's why when I get a heads up ahead of time, I try to talk to those guys. Now, as a parent, you can usually know, hey, if you're below that 90th percentile, it's not going to happen. But guys still hold out hope in some weird ways. They're just, they're very good at compartmentalizing. That's not me. Just a little bit about, the whole idea of ninth grade, applying to ninth grade. We're early in 8th grade, so this is not. But I do know. There will be some guys who will think, yeah, I want to look around. I want to look at other schools. I want to maybe apply out to other schools. Or they have a friend who goes here. He speaks well about it. And he should not be sheepish about it. He should not feel like he needs to hide that. If your son decides to apply to somewhere else, great. We talked to the boys about being open for growth. It's one of the 5 characteristics epigrammatic graph. And sometimes being open to growth means, hey, I want to look around and see what other options are out there. And if he is, our 8th grade advisors, many of them have worked with students who are applying out before. Many of them worked at schools which ended in 8th grade, and all their students were applying out. So they're good. You haven't talked to his advisor. You can talk to Mrs. Hornby, the guidance counselor. But just to sort of say, hey, if he's going to go look at another school, what's he looking for? And they can sort of give him some advice, or even talk him through it. Like, when he comes back, what did you see? If your son is applying out, but he's thinking, but he doesn't know, he's just looking, and he's going to be looking here. I'm certainly happy to set up for him to spend a morning in the high school as an Eagle for a day over there. If he's not applying out, there's no reason for him to spend a day in the high school. But if he is, and he really wants to compare, high school to high school rather than high school to middle school, happy to set him up. And we just have him come in civilian clothes, a different shirt or whatever, and they go over just for the morning. They do 3 periods, have lunch, and then come back over here, put their rugby shirt back on. It's probably a couple guys a year that end up doing this, maybe in a big year 5. But again, if they are looking and they're not sure, that's a good thing to have them do. For parents, if you're looking, you want to sort of consider some options and things like that. Again, there was the open house last weekend for the high school, but we do things here again. Mr. Drain will come in it's early March to give you guys, present what the high school academic program is. Later in April, presenting about the high school extracurricular opportunities. You're welcome to call the admissions office if you want to have them show you around or something like that. Don't feel like you don't have enough information. We can certainly get the information to you. There'll be an accepted students reception for new 9th graders accepted in February. It's not worth your time going to, I think, because it's really, they address everybody as if they've never been to BC High. That's why we have Mr. Drain right around that time. Mr. Drain come and talk to you about the high school opportunity, academic program. But again, feel free to ask us questions, ask admissions, call me, call high school administrators if you're trying to figure out, hey, what's that like? Sometimes parents are very focused on the 7th and 8th grade years while you're here, and then you think, I don't know anything about the high school. Then you have a neighbor whose son is applying to 9th grade, who's been to 2 open houses and has all this wealth of information, and you think, maybe I should know something too. So feel free to ask us if you want. Mrs. Hornby was Donuts are off at a workshop today, so she usually comes to parent coffees with me. She abandoned me today. But I'll be here and happy to answer questions, talk to you all for a while. Open time slot right now. So thank you all for coming in, and have a great day.